This podcast is brought to you by Burl Audio. Get it right the first time. Learn more at burlaudio.com.
Hey, it's Larry Crane. Welcome to the Tape Op Podcast. From humble beginnings in Hobbs, New Mexico, and a childhood spent moving from oilfield to oilfield for his father's jobs, Ryan Bingham rode bulls and eventually learned to play a guitar given to him by his mother for his 16th birthday. From a first gig at a biker's party to every roadhouse in the nowhere South, he honed his songwriting and playing, eventually landing a deal with Lost Highway Records. His big break came appearing in the film Crazy Heart alongside Jeff Bridges, and his song from the film, The Weary Kind, earned Bingham an Academy Award, Golden Globe Award, and Critics' Choice Award for Best Song in 2010, as well as a Grammy in 2011. The Americana Music Association also named Bingham 2010's Artist of the Year. Almost a decade on, Ryan is still writing, acting, most recently in the Netflix series Yellowstone, and making great records. Online publisher Geoff Stanfield caught up with Ryan in Seattle to talk about recording his latest release, American Love Song. Enjoy.
Thanks for doing this. I've been following you for a while now in your music, ways that you've progressed throughout your records. There have been some things that have been the same and some things that have been a little bit different on every record. Mm-hmm. But you got this new record, American Love Song, and is that right? American Love Songs?
Yeah, American Love Song, yeah.
And can you tell me a little bit about where did you guys record it and what was the process of making this record?
Yeah, it was a bit of a process. I was really kind of seeking out to work with a producer on this album. I wanted to collaborate with someone on this thing, and it took me a while to kind of zero in on someone to work with. And after just not necessarily really reaching out or approaching anybody, it was just kind of one of those things. The songs were kind of so personal to me, but at the same time, I wanted to, step out of my comfort zone and not be afraid to try different things or go in, maybe a different direction with things if that's what the songs called for. But ultimately, I ended up calling Charlie Sexton in Austin, Texas, and just saying, man, I want to make a country blues album, like kind of in the vein of Beggar's Banquet with like kind of Terry Allen-esque themes. It's the songs are part kind of autobiographical, part kind of fictional. It's a kind of a love song, a love story that kind of takes place in all the different places throughout the Southwest and the Southwest. I grew up in Texas and on kind of growing up and moving my way out to California and all along those highways and those roads. So each kind of song is kind of kind of takes place in a different setting.
Yeah.
And not only just kind of represents where I was living or staying at the time, but the people that I was hanging out with, the kind of music I was listening to, the food, the cultures, just there's a lot of different kind of, there's a lot of different shit going on just in the South and in Texas in general. It's such a big place, and from the West and all the kind of swing music and country stuff to down in the South along the Louisiana, Texas border and the coast and Houston hip hop scene and the Cajun music and the jazz and Zydeco and then all the Tejano and Conjunto stuff on the border and New Mexico and California. So it was just about kind of documenting that journey up to a certain point.
You mentioned a couple of things that I want to go back to, and one thing that before I forget was you talked about the story of the record, and you've been acting for a while, and your wife Anna is a filmmaker. I was curious, like how much of what that process over time has been brought into your storytelling as far as making records.
I think more than I realize, and I think that I've always looked at songs as if I'm kind of looking at an image and describing it, and mainly kind of just writing down and describing the images in my head of places that I, witnessed growing up or traveling on the road or around the world or whatnot. And it's really those kind of personal experiences and things that I've seen with my own eyes that I'm kind of writing about and talking about and describing and kind of weaving the stories into it as well of kind of what went down in some of those places. So I've really, not only just with the songwriting and kind of and recording an album as a whole, as a theme or whatever you want to call it, but also incorporating that into a live performance as well. I think the acting stuff has come into that of coming on stage and telling telling more stories in between the songs and what they're about and what they could be about. And I went and saw Bruce Springsteen on Broadway several months back, and it was just such a mind-blowing kind of performance. And a lot of it came from that latest book that he had came out with. And I really did. I've always been a fan of his, but after seeing that performance and how he used his life story and kind of wove that in within the songs and then the whole show on Broadway and all that, it really was inspiring and really just, it was something that I wanted to kind of explore and just kind of, because writing these songs and performing them for people is really, you're out there telling your story, and trying to find ways of getting that across and trying to translate that to people without them taking it out of context in certain ways, if that makes sense.
Which part of it? The storytelling or the songs?
Just kind of all of it.
Yeah.
I don't know how many times I've had a song or something and I appreciate that songs are meant for people to interpret in their own ways as well and to their own stories, but sometimes when things are interpreted in the wrong ways or taken out of context in a way that necessarily might be completely opposite of what I intended, I think it's at least nice sometimes to be able to explain, where the root of some of that stuff comes from.
Yeah, you're ultimately, as an artist, you cede control, I guess. You have to. I guess. Yeah. Everybody, right? Because you never know how someone's going to what it means to them personally, and I think people find whatever they want in anything.
Yeah.
One thing you talked about with Charlie Sexton, and I do want to talk about his working style and stuff and sort of the way that you guys collaborated, but one of the things that I noticed immediately when I put the record on was how Stonesy it was. So it's funny, and you reference Jumpin' Jack Flash in one of the tunes, and it really has like a 70s, late 60s, early 70s Stones feeling to it in a great way that was all your own, because you're not from England and you're writing about different things, but was that what you were listening to? Were you getting into that?
I was, and and maybe even just before, I've always really been into a lot of the Texas blues guys like Lightning Hopkins and then obviously like Townes Van Zandt and things, but I'm just really more of on the blues side, and I think that I've always, I've always been influenced by the blues and very inspired by the blues, and I think I'm not sure why I haven't explored that more. I've always loved playing acoustic slide guitar and things like that, and I've always loved the way that the Stones played country music, like those records like Beggar's Banquet and Let It Bleed, and those kinds of songs where there's fiddles and kind of some steel guitar or slide or whatever. There's just like kind of that mix of those sounds that I've always just really kind of felt like those are a lot of sounds that I grew up familiar with, of just different areas of whether Texas or whatever where I was living. Those sounds were familiar to me, the fiddles and then the slide, the acoustic guitars and the different rhythms and things like that. So I've always been really drawn to that, and I've kind of always wanted to make this kind of a record, and maybe not necessarily knew how to communicate that. And so when I was talking to Charlie, one great thing about working with Charlie is I didn't really have to explain to him what I was hearing in my head. I was just like, he's like, "What are you hearing? What do you want to do?" I'm like, "Man, Lightning Hopkins, Terry Allen, Beggar's Banquet." He's like, "Oh yeah, come on in,"
Right. That's such an important part of who you collaborate with, is just having those references, so because you're already aligned, you know, and if somebody has it, you already have a common language, and then you're past it.
Yeah.
And you can get on to other things. How did you guys track it, and where did you guys make the record?
We moved around a bit. Charlie was on tour with Dylan and kind of back and forth to the studio, so we wanted to do everything in Arlen, there in Austin, Texas, Arlen Studios, but it was only available for certain times. It was kind of the last minute. I called him up and he's like, man, I got time, we can do it right now, you know, if we get in there. So we did some at Arlen Studios and some at Public Hi-Fi there in Austin as well. And then we finished it up with my friend Justin Stanley in Los Angeles. And a majority of it we did there at Arlen. Yeah.
And how was the spur of the moment timing for you? I mean, how much had you been working on the songs, and how much pre-production time did you get with Charlie, or did you guys just go in and...
Man, I'd been writing songs for the past couple of years, so I had, you know, a lot of it, and I had done kind of extensive demos at my house, and I actually had went out to, I took some recording gear to a buddy's ranch out in New Mexico. He has this little cabin that I go right out in the middle of the desert, and I'd been recording demos, and so I had the songs kind of, you know, quite far along as far as just certain elements I wanted on them. And so whenever I sent those to Charlie, it was just like, there wasn't really any pre-production much. I think we got together for a couple of weeks. I wanted some help on some choruses and things like that, and with the arrangements on the songs. And that was one thing I really kind of wanted to leave open to Charlie, is like, even songs that I might have already had a chorus for, or I had some kind of bridge or instrumentation on it, I would just try to take it to him and leave it really bare bones, because I wanted him to kind of have his input on that. Just really respect his kind of musical direction, especially when it comes to the band and everything. So I think we got together for like maybe a week, you know, and just kind of played together with some guitars, and he'd play some piano, and I'd send him the demo so he had time to listen to those songs, and then went into the studio, and the band had never heard them before. We just sat down and kind of, Charlie talked to those guys and was like, let's get it. You know? Did
you put the band together, or did he put the band together?
He did, yeah. He did, yeah. J.J. Johnson and Scott Nelson in Austin with the rhythm section, and I wanted to leave that up to Charlie as well. It's kind of one of the things I didn't want to be so, I kind of wanted to put that all into Charlie's hands, and with a producer collaborating with that, and just kind of, and be able to, for me, just to really focus on the songs and perform, and you know, we really tracked a lot of that stuff live, and so I didn't want to have to really think about a lot of that.
Yeah, I think it's cool. I mean, obviously Dylan was one of the guys that liked to have a lot of spontaneity, and not having people have spent a lot of time with the songs and sort of get those initial first reactions to the music and capture it.
Yeah,
and that's sort of it.
Yeah, and I do too. I like that, but for me, it's because my wife and I, we have our own record label, and I finance my own records and things like that. So the only part of that makes me nervous for me is like, I don't have a ton of money to always spend in the studio. So I try to get as much work done as I can before I go in, so I can really make the best out of my time. So there was definitely a process of like having to hold myself back, of just being like, I'll just let it go, let it be what it's going to be, and not try to plan everything out, and really let Charlie just kind of take it into wherever direction it would go.
Yeah, I mean, I think you probably enjoy listening to it more than, you know, having handed over the reins a little bit to Charlie, or a lot to Charlie. It probably gives you extra listening enjoyment, because it wasn't all you, right?
I did, and you know, and it really took the songs to places that I couldn't take them. You know, I mean, I'm a huge fan of a lot of different kinds of music, and the references that I had given him, like the Stone stuff, or the Terry Allen stuff, or Lightning Hopkins, or any of that kind of acoustic Texas blues stuff. But I don't necessarily know if I could go in with a band I don't have the I don't know, musical knowledge or lingo to be able to communicate that to a band, I guess is what I'm saying. I don't have a very strong foundation musically with a band. Like, I was kind of a guy that started playing the guitars at the rodeo on the back of a pickup truck, you know, but I don't, you know, I never played with a band in school. I don't have any kind of formal training or anything like that. So whenever I go into the studio with a band, I'm just kind of like, play the song, you know, and then the band plays along, and Charlie could really get in there and be like, we need this, we need that, these are the kind of sounds we're going for, communicate all that and really make it happen.
So what were some of the things that surprised you or that you thought were really cool that he brought to the songs? I mean, I would imagine like different grooves and things like that and different rhythm section feels and
definitely with the different grooves and things like that. Him and JJ I think have worked a lot together, and we would he brought these, I don't know, you probably know what they're called, like little I can't remember what they're called, like something you kind of program click tracks out of them, but they're kind of those old school 80s analog, whatever. And so he would like come up with these just like crazy beats on this for the clip to use as a click, and then I would kind of play along to it, but then what they would bring into it would be completely different, just from the way they were hearing it and the way he was, what Charlie was wanting to get out of it, and I really found that interesting and a lot of fun would be around that.
Yeah. What's your when you're out doing your demos, and I know you've done that before, where you headed off into the mountains or the the woods in a trailer just to have some real focused time in terms of writing and working on tunes. How are you capturing yourself, and like what's your home studio up? Because I think when I was there you had like a maybe even a reel-to-reel there. Do you have one? Or
I do, yeah. I got one of those Tascam kind of 8-track reel-to-reels and a board, but for all the demo stuff that I was doing, I was just using Pro Tools on a little laptop. I brought 2 or 3 guitars and a mandolin and a keyboard, and I just did all the demos on that. Yeah. And just kind of played, and just kept them very bare bones and minimal, and did some drum loops and things like that, just to kind of try to get myself to play different things,
Yeah, and then so there's about 15 tunes on the record or something about there. How many tunes did you sort of present to Charlie and go through them?
I think I maybe 16 or 17. I think I got like 30 or more altogether that I've got enough that I want to do another album after this, but just acoustic solo. It's just a lot of ballads and things like that. And so I can't remember exactly how many I sent to Charlie, but I kind of had a pretty clear idea of what I wanted to go on this album and then what I want to go on the next one. So.
Right, so you'd sort of curated it a little bit even prior.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so you've worked with a bunch of producers over the years, and I was sort of curious, just wanted to read you a few names and ask you, what each of them sort of brought to the project, or what have you sort of learned from each of them? So one guy, big looming name, is Tbone Burnett, who you worked on Junkie Star with. Mm-hmm. Did that collaboration come out of the film?
It did, yeah. Mm-hmm.
How was it working with Tbone, and what was his process like, and what did he bring? What did you learn from him?
Man, that whole experience was just such a trip for me. I was, it all came through that film, and I was talking to somebody about this the other day. It's kind of one of those things you can never really be prepared for, Like it's one of those, I wish I was a little older and a little more experienced when I had gone in that situation. But it all happened so fast, and it was all, you just kind of had to hang on and go with it. And after the success with the film and working on the soundtrack just alone with all those musicians that played on that, it was just just sitting in a room with all your heroes and people that you've heard play on records for decades, and all of a sudden you're sitting in a recording studio and they're playing your songs, and it was pretty magical, pretty surreal, and then to continue on and get to do another album, with Tbone was just like, I don't know. I just still feel like I was just not really able to soak it in so much because it was all happening so fast, and it's just like I think we recorded that whole album in like 5 days. We just went in and tracked all this. First I think we went to Tbone's house with me and my band, and sat down in the living room. He goes, just play them all for me in my living room. I want to hear what they sound like, just you guys playing them live. And we went and just played them, and he's like, we're gonna record it just like that. So we went over to the village, set up, and just did one right after the other. Probably did 2 or 3 takes of each song, and then that was it.
Wow.
At the time I had my bar band, I don't say like my bar band, but my longtime buddies, the Dead Horses, had been in my band forever. And we had a couple of records out. And then the movie thing hit, and then all of a sudden, you know, with all that, I got all the pressure, like from my manager and even from Tbone, and they wanted me to do the next record with all their guys, and which I wanted to too, you know. It was like an opportunity to do a record like that with all those players, but it just would have really broke the hearts of all those guys in my band, I think, if I would have, you know, just kind of shrugged them off and said, fuck it, I'm gonna go do this right now. So, you know, I really had to kind of make that decision, and you know, I remember talking to Tbone about it. We went out for dinner, and he was like, I was like, man, Tbone's like, you know, I really think we should use these guys for your record, and it's going to be amazing, and this and that. And I said, you know, I hear you all the way, but I can't do this to my guys right now, you know, at this moment. It's going to have to be a little longer process, you know. And so he's like, all right, well, let's just get in there and just get it how we can get it, you know. And because none of us were session players, you know, we're a bunch of young kids that played in bars and honky tonks, and not to say that we didn't have a vibe and we didn't have something special going on between us when we played, but you know, the difference between, you know, some of the players that Tbone has on records and, you know, guys like me and my band, you know, from that time. So.
Yeah, but, you know, I mean, that's the personality. I mean, you guys have a thing, you know, whether you sort of downplay it or not. I mean, you guys had a thing that...
Oh, we definitely did. I'm not trying to downplay it at all. I'm just kind of trying to put it into perspective, you know, of like a situation that I was in as a young guy and at those crossroads. And
Who were some of those players that you were trying to, that they were trying to get on the record?
Greg Leitz, a lot of the guys that actually played on the whole Crazy Heart soundtrack, you know, same guys, so... And we were already all in the studio, and it was already all going, and we were already recording. He's like, man, let's just keep it going and just record your album. And I'm like, oh, you know, I gotta. I was like, I want to get my guys in here for this one, you know.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Cool. How about Mark Ford? You know, you did Mescalito and Roadhouse Sun with him.
You know, he that's the first, when I first met Mark was when I very first went to LA and met Mark in a bar. It was just me and my drummer at the time. I think we were just like a two-piece band. And I was a huge Black Crowes fan, so was my drummer at the time. And that was about the time, I think, right when Mark had got back with him, was starting to tour. And so we were pretty stoked to meet him and work with him. And I kind of want to say, like, he really taught me how to play music with a band. I'd never played with a band. I'd only played with a drummer really before.
Yeah.
And, you know, I had a handful of songs, but, you know, I didn't really know a whole lot about, you know, arrangements and things and playing with the band and, you know, all the space and timing. You know, there were a lot of things that I had a long way to go. And I just going in the studio with him, and it's like, you know, he's teaching me how to count the song off. I mean, that basic of shit, you know. It's like, all right, you guys just play your parts, you know, play together, you know. And he even went on the road with us for a bit and played guitar with us. And so that was I didn't even know how to I'd never played electric guitar. I didn't even know how to set it up on stage. So, you know, he bought me this old Craftsman guitar for like $100 off eBay, gave me a slide and put acoustic strings on it, and got me this little, like, I don't know what it was, some little boutique amp, like with a 10-inch speaker in it. Had two knobs, and he's like, you can't get in too much trouble with this. There's a volume knob and a tone knob, you know. He goes, just turn it all the way up and play this, and just really, you know, kind of cultivated us me anyway, probably more than anybody else, because I really had no clue what I was doing out there, you know. Just a kid with a guitar and a handful of ballads, and he's like teaching us how to play rock and roll.
Yeah, that's cool. How about Jim Scott? Another sort of legend that you...
Yeah, he's great, man. Jim was a guy too. You know, I'd been a fan of a lot of the stuff that I'd heard him be a part of, and I knew he lived in Los Angeles, but I didn't know how accessible of a guy he would be to maybe get in touch with. And it was kind of one of those things where I don't know where I got his number from. Somebody I got his phone number from, called him up, and you know, asked him if he'd be interested in working, and he said, hell yeah, come out to my place. He's got a studio.
You're in Valencia,
Valencia, yeah, Castaic Lakes out there, and it's a big fucking warehouse that he's been collecting gear in for however 20, 30 years, you know.
Yeah,
and,
gear and tie-dyes.
Oh man, all kinds of cool shit out there. He's a great guy. Had an amazing time working with him out there. Obviously, all that stuff that he's got and how he runs it and the sounds. He was another guy too, where like you could just say, you could reference a sound or a record or an instrument or anything, and he
Right.
know how to get the sound immediately. You know?
Right.
He didn't
Right.
take him like a half an hour, like trying to get a mic set up or
Right, yeah.
this kind of snare. He's like, oh, here, this, that, and turn it on, and there
Yeah.
it was. You know,
I mean, I think that that's such a huge part of production is just keeping it going,
Yeah.
keeping the wheels going, you know, and that's a really interesting point about him. I've heard that, like, oh, there's the snare drum that's on, you know, he just knows the sounds of the instruments and
that, you know, I mean, we did that Fear and Saturday Night fairly quick too. I think we did like, you know, we tracked 2 or 3 songs a day, just pretty much live, and we did that whole record in a week or two, and that was the thing. Like we could just roll one to the next, and if something wasn't working, he would just go, "Hold on, guys, for something's. I want to change the sound of this over here or that," and it would just. You wouldn't even notice him doing it, but then after the fact, you know, after you're, you know, a month later, whenever you're listening to the record, and you're like, "Oh, damn," you know.
yeah.
You can tell where he was making those moves. I wish I knew more about some gear to talk about.
Oh, I don't want to talk about gear. Well, that's the funny thing is
Pretty
that
basic over here.
we don't spend. We spend a lot of time talking about how unimportant gear is. You know? It's nice to have. Sometimes it makes your job easier, but you know, it's not certainly not the end all, and it's certainly boring to sit around and talk about that, right? Yeah. All right, man. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Joe.
Thanks for listening. Find us online at tapop.com, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Until next time.
Jumping jack flash in my body, yeah. Dancing on the levee in the morning light.
And finally, folks, this interview was recorded using the Device audio interface from DPA microphones. It's perfect for great sounding recordings on the go.
Down, I'm weak in the knees. Don't you go singing down low.